I am Liam, I'm 24 years old, and my parents told me that my twin brother deserved a fully funded college education, and I didn't. Before I tell you about the moment their world came crashing down around them in a crowded auditorium, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's good to know we're all here together. The air in the auditorium was thick with that unique blend of cheap polyester, hairspray, and unadulterated hope that you only find at a college graduation. It was suffocating. From my seat in the front row, the one reserved for students graduating with high honors, I could see my family perfectly. My mom, dad, and my twin brother, Ryan, were 3 rows back, right on the aisle. They were impossible to miss. My mother was practically vibrating with pride, her smile so wide it looked painful. She kept patting my father's arm, pointing at the stage, then at Ryan, who was sitting a few sections over with the rest of the general student body. They thought this day was all about him. They had paid for it, after all. Every textbook, every late-night pizza, every dollar of his tuition for his business degree. They had invested in their golden boy, the one they believed was destined for greatness. They looked like a perfect, proud family in a holiday card. My father caught my eye and gave me a curt, almost dismissive nod. It was the kind of acknowledgement you give a stranger who holds the door open for you. No warmth, just a polite reflex. My mother's gaze swept right over me, her eyes locked on Ryan. It was a familiar feeling, like being a ghost at my own family's party. I was there, but I wasn't seen. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. For 4 years, I had dreamed of this day. Not for the diploma, not for the cap and gown, but for the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had done it alone. I had survived. The dean of the business school, a stout man with a booming voice, strode to the podium. "Good afternoon, graduates, families, and faculty," he began, his voice echoing through the hall. "Today, we celebrate the culmination of years of hard work." My mother's smile widened. She thought she knew what was coming. She believed Ryan, her charming, popular Ryan, was the star of the show. The dean continued, "Before we confer the degrees, we have one final, very special honor to bestow. This is the Benjamin Ford National Scholarship Award. It is given to only 5 students in the entire country. It represents not only academic excellence of the highest order, but a level of perseverance and character that truly sets the recipient apart." I saw my mother lean over and whisper something to my father. He puffed out his chest. They were so sure, so blissfully, arrogantly sure. The camera panned across the audience, and for a fleeting moment, their proud, beaming faces were projected onto the giant screens on either side of the stage. Perfect family. My heart was a jackhammer against my ribs. Here it comes. The dean cleared his throat, a dramatic pause silencing the entire auditorium. He looked down at the card in his hand, then out at the sea of faces. "This year's recipient," he boomed, his voice filled with reverence, "is a student who embodies the very spirit of this award. Please join me in congratulating Mr. Liam Moore." The world went silent for a second. The name just hung there in the air. I watched the giant screen as the camera, after a moment of confusion, swung away from my family and found me in the front row. And in that split second before it moved, I saw it. I saw the smiles on my parents' faces not just disappear, but shatter. My mother's mouth fell open. My father's face went slack, the color draining from it as if a plug had been pulled. Their eyes, wide with disbelief and a dawning horror, were locked on me. The applause started, a ripple that grew into a tidal wave. But I couldn't hear it. All I could see were their faces. And as I stood up, the ice in my stomach finally began to melt, replaced by a fire that had been waiting for long years to burn. The story didn't start here, in this moment of public triumph. It started long ago, in the quiet, unnoticed moments where a family's love is supposed to be forged, but where mine was instead broken. It's funny how the big, life-altering moments are built on a foundation of 1,000 tiny injustices. You don't notice them at first. They're just life. It's only when you look back that you see the pattern, the blueprint of your own insignificance in the eyes of the people who were supposed to see you most clearly. For me and Ryan, it started with a bicycle. We were 7. For our birthday, Ryan got a brand new, gleaming red Schwinn. It had streamers on the handlebars and a bell that chimed like an angel. I got his old bike, the one with the wobbly training wheels, covered in a sloppy coat of blue paint my dad had applied in the garage. "There," my dad said, stepping back with a grunt of satisfaction. "Good as new." But it wasn't. It was heavy and clumsy, and the blue paint was already flaking off, revealing the scratched-up green underneath. Ryan zipped past me on his new red bike, bell ringing, a king on his throne. I just stood there, my hands sticky from the still tacky paint, and felt a confusing ache in my chest. When I tried to complain, my mom just ruffled my hair. "Don't be ungrateful, Liam. Ryan's just a bit more sensitive. He needs the new things. You're tough. You can handle anything. You're tough." That became my label, my curse. It was the excuse for everything. A year later, I fell out of the oak tree in our backyard and broke my arm. I lay on the grass, a white-hot pain shooting from my wrist to my shoulder, trying not to cry because I knew what was coming. My dad hauled me up, his face a mask of annoyance. "I told you not to climb so high. Look what you've done." In the emergency room, as the doctor set the bone, my mom just sighed. "Honestly, Liam, you have to be more careful. You're giving me gray hairs." 2 weeks after my cast came off, Ryan tripped on the sidewalk. He came home with a scraped knee, wailing like he'd been shot. My mother scooped him up, her voice a symphony of panicked coos. "Oh, my poor baby. My poor, sweet boy." She cleaned the tiny scrape with antiseptic, covered it with the biggest bandage we had, and let him eat ice cream for dinner while watching cartoons. I sat at the kitchen table, my own arm still aching with a phantom pain, and just watched them. That was the rhythm of our lives. Ryan got the lead in the school play. I was on the stage crew. Ryan's mediocre report card was met with, "He's trying his best. He's more of a people person." My straight A's were met with, "Well, of course. You've always been the bookish one." It wasn't that they were cruel. It was something more insidious. It was a complete and utter lack of curiosity about who I was. In their eyes, the roles had been cast at birth. Ryan was the charming, fragile one who needed protecting, nurturing, and endless support. I was the strong, independent, self-sufficient one who would always just figure it out. I learned to stop asking. I stopped showing them my good grades. I stopped telling them about my successes on the debate team. It was easier than facing the lukewarm disinterest. I learned to be an island. I built my own world inside my head, a place where my achievements mattered, even if only to me. I became fiercely independent because I had no other choice. They saw this independence not as a survival mechanism I had been forced to develop, but as my core nature. They had created the very trait they would later use as a justification to abandon me. It was a perfect, self-fulfilling prophecy, and I was trapped right in the middle of it. And the worst part? For the longest time, I thought this was just how families worked. I didn't know any different. The spring of my senior year of high school was a tense, exhilarating time. College acceptance letters were rolling in, each envelope holding a potential future. Ryan and I had both applied to the same state university, a well-respected school about 3 hours from home, both aiming for the business program, specifically accounting. It was a practical choice, a path to a stable career. The day the letters arrived, my mom insisted on making a ceremony out of it. We all gathered in the living room. 2 thick envelopes lay on the coffee table. Ryan, ever the showman, tore his open with a flourish. "I'm in," he shouted, waving the letter in the air. My parents erupted in cheers, hugging him, my dad clapping him on the back so hard he stumbled. Then all eyes turned to me. My envelope felt heavy in my hands. I slid it open carefully. The bold, congratulatory script swam before my eyes. "I got in too," I said, my voice quiet. "Oh, that's wonderful, dear," my mom said, her smile already fading as she turned her attention back to Ryan. "A real accountant, just like your uncle." The celebration continued, but it was all for Ryan. My acceptance was an afterthought, a footnote. Later that night, I was heading downstairs for a glass of water when I heard their voices coming from the kitchen. My dad's low rumble, my mom's higher, more animated tones. I paused at the bottom of the stairs, hidden in the shadows of the hallway. "The tuition is steep," my dad was saying. "Even for a state school. For both of them." "Don't be silly, honey," my mom replied, and her next words were the ones that would echo in my head for years. "We'll handle Ryan's, of course. We'll pay his tuition in full and make sure he has enough for a nice dorm room and spending money. He needs to be able to focus on his studies and, the college experience." There was a pause. I held my breath. "And Liam?" my father asked. His voice wasn't argumentative, it was just clarifying. My mother let out a little laugh, a sound that was supposed to be light and airy but landed on me like a physical blow. "Oh, Liam will be fine. He's always been the clever one. He'll figure something out. He always does." I could hear the scrape of a chair as my dad presumably settled back. "He is independent," he agreed, his voice filled with a strange, misplaced pride. "He doesn't need as much help." "Exactly," my mom said, her voice bright with relief, as if she had just solved a complex puzzle. "This will be good for him. Build character. We're raising a strong, self-reliant man. We should be proud." I stood there in the darkness, the cold linoleum floor seeping through my socks. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the casual, effortless way they had written me off. It was the verdict they had passed on my worth. I was not the son to be invested in. I was the son who was expected to fend for himself. My strength, the very quality they claimed to admire, was my punishment. In that moment, a cold, hard resolve settled over me. It wasn't a dramatic, movie-like decision. It was a quiet, internal shift. The part of me that had always held out a sliver of hope that they might one day see me finally withered and died. Fine. If they wanted me to figure it out, I would. I would go to that university. I would get that degree. But I would do it entirely on my own. I made a silent vow to myself, standing there in the dark. I would never, ever ask them for a single penny. I would sooner drop out than give them the satisfaction of saying no. They had drawn a line in the sand, and I decided right then and there that I would build a life on the other side of it, a life they had no part in creating. The first few weeks of college felt like stepping into a parallel universe. Ryan and I were at the same school in the same program, but we might as well have been on different planets. My parents drove him up in the family SUV, packed to the brim with new bedding, a mini fridge, a flat-screen TV, and enough snacks to feed a small army. They helped him move into his spacious dorm room, the kind with a view of the campus quad. He joined a fraternity within the first month, his evenings filled with mixers, parties, and the easy camaraderie that comes with a shared social calendar and a generous allowance from home. His Instagram was a highlight reel of college life. Football games, formals, spring break trips to Cancun. My college experience began with a bus ticket. I arrived on campus with 2 worn-out suitcases and a backpack filled with my entire life. I had spent the summer working 2 full-time jobs, bussing tables and stocking shelves, and had managed to save just enough for my first semester's tuition and a security deposit on a tiny, grim room I found for rent in a house 3 miles off campus. The room smelled of mildew and old plumbing. The window looked out onto a brick wall. But it was mine. My days were a relentless, grueling cycle. I scheduled all my classes for the earliest morning slots. From 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., I was a student. As soon as my last class ended, I'd rush to the campus library, not to study, but to work. I had a job shelving books, a quiet, monotonous task that paid just enough to cover my rent. My shift ended at 10 p.m. From there, I'd walk another mile to a 24-hour diner where I worked the graveyard shift as a cleaner, wiping down tables, mopping sticky floors, and scrubbing grease traps until 3 a.m. I'd stumble home, my body aching and my clothes smelling of disinfectant and old coffee, and catch a few hours of sleep before the alarm went off at 6 a.m. to do it all over again. Weekends were for my second job, cleaning office buildings downtown. Study time was crammed into stolen moments, on the bus, during my 15-minute break at the library, in the dead hours of the night at the diner when the world was asleep. I saw Ryan on campus sometimes. He'd be laughing with his fraternity brothers, a girl on his arm, looking fresh-faced and carefree. He'd spot me, hurrying from a class to a job, dark circles under my eyes, and he'd wave. "Hey, Liam," he'd call out. "You look tired, man. Maybe you should manage your time better." He wasn't being malicious. He was just oblivious. In his world, time was something you managed for social activities and studying. In my world, time was a currency I never had enough of. He saw my exhaustion as a personal failing, a lack of organization, because the concept of having to work 40 hours a week just to exist was utterly foreign to him. My one lifeline was Chloe. She was in my advanced accounting class, a whip-smart girl with a dry sense of humor who saw past my perpetually weary exterior. She was the first person to ask me why I always looked so tired, and when I finally told her, she didn't offer pity. She just nodded, and the next day, she showed up to our study group with an extra coffee for me. She became my only friend, the only person who knew the full story, the only one who saw the two separate worlds we were living in. She was my anchor in the storm, a quiet presence that reminded me I wasn't entirely invisible. Sophomore year, the dam finally broke. It was midterm season, a particularly brutal one. I had a massive economics paper due, 2 accounting exams, and a presentation in corporate finance, all in the same week. On top of that, my hours at the diner had been cut, and my landlord had just informed me the rent was going up. I was running on fumes, surviving on caffeine and sheer, stubborn will. The numbers weren't adding up. I was short for next month's tuition payment. Not by a lot, but by enough to matter. $500. To my parents, it was a nice dinner out. To me, it was a mountain. Then I got sick. A nasty flu that settled deep in my chest, leaving me dizzy and weak. I had to miss 2 shifts, which meant even less money. The doctor prescribed antibiotics that cost $100 I didn't have. I paid for them anyway, using the money I had set aside for groceries. For 3 days, I lived on saltine crackers and tap water. I was lying in my cold, damp room, feverish and shivering, staring at the tuition bill on my desk. The due date was circled in red. I felt a wave of despair so profound it almost drowned me. I had been so proud, so determined to do it alone. But in that moment, I felt broken. And I did the one thing I swore I would never do. I picked up the phone and called my mom. She answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful. "Liam, what a surprise. Is everything okay?" My throat was raw, and my voice came out as a pathetic croak. "Hey, Mom. Yeah, I'm a little sick." "Oh, you poor thing," she said, though her tone was distracted. I could hear the clatter of pans in the background. "Well, drink plenty of fluids. You've always had a strong constitution." I took a deep breath, my pride screaming at me to hang up. "Mom, I need to ask you something. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't an emergency. I'm a little short on my tuition payment this semester. Just a few $100s. I can pay you back as soon as I can pick up more shifts." The cheerful sounds from her kitchen stopped. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy, suffocating. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost all its warmth. It was flat, cold, and laced with disappointment. "Liam," she said, and the way she drew out my name made it sound like an accusation. "We've already talked about this. Your father and I are paying for Ryan's education. That was our agreement." "It wasn't an agreement," I whispered, my voice cracking. "It was a decision you made. I wasn't even there." "We're doing what we think is best," she snapped, her voice turning sharp. "Ryan needs our support. He deserves it. We've already given you so much." My head was spinning. What had they given me? Life? A roof over my head for 18 years? Was that the currency they were trading in? "Mom, please," I begged, hating the sound of my own voice. "I'm working 2 jobs. I'm barely sleeping. I just need a little help." And then came the words that would be seared into my memory forever. The final, fatal blow to whatever shred of a relationship we had left. "Listen to me, Liam," she said, her voice dropping to a low, serious tone, as if she were imparting some profound wisdom. "We paid for Ryan because he deserved it. But you didn't. You're strong. You'll figure it out. You always do. My hand gripped the phone so hard the plastic creaked. My throat closed up. Couldn't breathe. It wasn't just a no. It was a judgment. A confirmation of my deepest fear. That in their eyes, I was not worthy of their help, of their love. My strength wasn't a virtue. It was a convenience that absolved them of all responsibility. I couldn't even manage a goodbye. I just pressed the end button. The phone slipped from my sweaty palm and clattered to the floor. I sat there on the edge of my bed, the silence of the room roaring in my ears. The fever, the exhaustion, the hunger. It all vanished, replaced by an emptiness so vast it felt like a black hole had opened up in my chest. Something inside of me didn't just break that day. It died. And in its place, something cold and hard and unbreakable began to form. They had made their choice. Now I would make mine. Just when I thought I had hit rock bottom, the floor gave way. Her name was Sarah. We had been high school sweethearts, one of those couples everyone assumes will get married. She was beautiful, bubbly, and the anchor to what I considered my normal life. She went to a different college, a smaller liberal arts school about an hour away, but we tried to make it work. We saw each other on holidays, texted constantly. She was my confidant, the one person outside of Chloe who I thought understood the pressure I was under. But the distance and the divergence of our lives was starting to show. Her college life was a whirlwind of parties, theater productions, and weekend trips. Mine was a monotonous loop of class, work, study, and exhaustion. When we talked on the phone, I could hear the laughter and music in the background of her dorm, while I was usually whispering from the quiet stacks of the library during my break. The week after the devastating phone call with my mom, Sarah drove up to see me. I thought it was a gesture of support. I was desperate for some human connection, some warmth to combat the icy chill that had settled in my bones. We met at a small coffee shop near campus. She looked radiant, full of life. I felt like a ghost sitting across from her. "You look awful, Liam," she said, not with concern, but with a hint of accusation. It was the same thing Ryan always said. "It's been a tough week," I admitted, stirring my black coffee. She sighed, a dramatic, theatrical sound. "It's always a tough week, Liam. That's the problem. I feel like I don't even know you anymore. All you do is work and study. You're obsessed." I was taken aback. "I have to be, Sarah. You know my situation. I don't have a choice." "But you do have a choice," she insisted, her voice rising slightly. "You could take out a student loan. You could work one job instead of two. You could choose to have some fun, to actually live a little." The mention of loans stung. I had looked into them, of course, but the thought of starting my life with a mountain of debt, a burden my brother would never have to face, felt like another form of punishment. It was a matter of principle, a bitter, painful principle. "It's not that simple," I said, my jaw tightening. She reached across the table, but her touch was hesitant, not comforting. "I went to that party at Ryan's fraternity last weekend," she said softly. My head snapped up. "You what?" "He invited me," she said, looking away. "It was fun, Liam. Everyone was laughing, dancing. People were just enjoying being young. Ryan knows how to have a good time. He knows how to live." The implication hung in the air between us, thick and poisonous. He knows how to live, and you don't. It all clicked into place. The late-night texts that had gone unanswered. The vague excuses for not being able to talk. She hadn't just been growing distant. She had been drifting into my brother's orbit, the world of ease and fun that I couldn't provide. "So this is it, then?" I asked, my voice flat. "You're breaking up with me." She finally met my eyes, and what I saw there wasn't sadness. It was pity. "I can't do this anymore, Liam. I can't keep waiting for you to come up for air. You're so focused on this struggle, on proving something. I want to be with someone who is present. Someone who isn't always fighting. Someone like Ryan." She didn't have to say it. I felt a bitter laugh escape my lips. It was a hollow, ugly sound. "So, my hard work, my ambition, that's a turn-off for you?" "It's not ambition, Liam," she said, standing up, her bag slung over her shoulder. It's a chip on your shoulder. And I can't be with someone who carries that much anger around. She walked out of the coffee shop, leaving me there with 2 cold cups and the wreckage of a 4-year relationship. It was a betrayal so complete, so profound, it felt like a physical blow. First my family, now the girl I loved. Both of them had looked at my struggle and seen it not as a testament to my strength, but as a flaw in my character. They had both chosen the easier path, the sunnier disposition, the golden boy. That night, the loneliness was a physical entity. It was a weight on my chest, a cold that seeped into my bones. I was completely and utterly alone. And in that moment of absolute desolation, something shifted. The last remnants of my softness, of my hope for understanding, were burned away. All that was left was a core of tempered steel. They all thought my struggle was my weakness. I would make it my weapon. It was in that abyss of loneliness and fury that a lifeline appeared, from the most unexpected of places. His name was Professor Albright. He taught advanced corporate accounting, a class notoriously difficult, designed to weed out the students who weren't serious. He was a legend in the department. A sharp, no-nonsense man in his late 60s with a mind like a steel trap and a reputation for not suffering fools gladly. Most students were terrified of him. I wasn't. I was too tired to be terrified. All I had was the work. I threw myself into his class with a desperate, single-minded focus. It was the one area of my life where the rules were clear. You put in the effort, you learned the material, you got the grade. There was no favoritism, no hidden agenda. Just numbers and logic. It was a refuge. I never spoke in class. I just sat in the back, absorbed every word, and turned in papers and exams that were meticulously, almost obsessively, prepared. One afternoon, after I had aced a particularly brutal midterm that half the class had failed, Professor Albright held me back as students were filing out. "Mr. Moore," he said, his voice a low gravel. "A word, please." My heart sank. I assumed I had done something wrong. I walked up to his desk, my backpack slung over one shoulder. He was looking down at my exam, a pair of reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. "This is exceptional work," he said, tapping a finger on the paper. "Not just correct. The logic is elegant. You see the connections others miss." I was so stunned I could only manage a quiet, "Thank you, sir." He looked up at me then, his eyes sharp and analytical, and he really looked at me. It was an unnerving feeling. It felt like he could see right through the tired facade to the engine of fury and exhaustion that was driving me. "You look like hell, son," he said bluntly. There was no judgment in his voice, only fact. I didn't know what to say. "It's a busy semester." He leaned back in his chair, studying me for a long moment. "I see you in the library sometimes when I leave late. You're always there. Then I see you heading out into the night, not towards the dorms. Where do you go?" The question was so direct, so personal, it caught me off guard. And for some reason, I didn't lie. "I have a cleaning shift," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "at the diner on the edge of town." He nodded slowly, as if that confirmed a theory he had been working on. He didn't offer pity. He didn't say, "Oh, you poor thing." He just looked at me with a newfound respect. "I'm working on a research project," he said, changing the subject abruptly, "analyzing the earnings reports of Fortune 500 companies for evidence of creative accounting. It's tedious, detail-oriented work. Pays $20 an hour. I need an assistant who is meticulous and trustworthy. Are you interested?" $20 an hour. It was more than double what I was making at both my other jobs combined. But more than the money, it was the offer itself. It was validation. It was someone of his stature seeing my potential, not my circumstances. It was a hand reaching down into the darkness. "Yes," I said, my voice hoarse with emotion. "Sir, yes. I'm very interested." He gave a curt nod. "Good. My office. Tomorrow. 4 p.m. Don't be late." As I walked out of that classroom, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was something far more precious. It was a flicker of hope. Working for Professor Albright changed everything. I was able to quit my grueling, soul-crushing cleaning job at the diner. The extra time and mental energy felt like a luxury. For the first time in years, I was getting more than 4 hours of sleep a night. My grades, already good, became stellar. Professor Albright was more than a boss. He became a mentor. He never pried into my personal life, but he understood. He saw the fire in me, the relentless drive, and instead of questioning it, he channeled it. He pushed me harder than any teacher ever had, handing me complex problems and challenging my assumptions. In his office, surrounded by towers of books and the smell of old paper, I felt seen and valued for my mind. It was a feeling I had never gotten from my own family. One late afternoon in the spring of our senior year, he called me into his office. "Sit down, Liam," he said, gesturing to the worn leather chair across from his desk. His tone was serious. "I've been watching you for 2 years now," he began, getting straight to the point. "Your work ethic is unparalleled. Your intellect is obvious. What are your plans after graduation?" "I'm applying for jobs," I said. "Entry-level accounting positions at a few local firms." He waved a dismissive hand. "That's thinking too small. You're capable of more." He opened a drawer and pulled out a brochure. He slid it across the desk to me. The title was printed in elegant gold lettering, the Benjamin Ford National Scholarship. "It's one of the most prestigious awards an undergraduate business student can receive," he explained. "It's not just about grades. It's about character, resilience, and overcoming adversity. The winners receive a significant cash prize and, more importantly, a guaranteed job offer at one of the top accounting firms in the country. Ford and Levine in New York, to be exact." New York felt like another planet. "Professor," I started. "I don't think I do." He cut me off, his gaze firm. "They're looking for someone exactly like you, Liam. Someone who has fought for their education. Someone who understands the value of a dollar because they've had to earn every single one themselves." He told me the application required a series of essays, letters of recommendation, and a detailed financial disclosure. It was a long shot. Only 5 students in the entire nation were chosen. "I will write your primary recommendation," he said, leaving no room for argument. "The rest is up to you." A new kind of fire lit inside me. This was it. This was the chance to not just graduate, but to launch myself into a different stratosphere, a place my family's low expectations could never reach. I took the brochure and for the next month, I poured every spare moment into that application. I wrote and rewrote the essays, telling my story without self-pity, focusing on the work and the lessons learned. I gathered my financial records, the pay stubs from the library and the diner, the tuition bills paid in installments. It was all there, in black and white, a paper trail of my silent struggle. And I told no one, not Chloe, certainly not my family. This was my gamble, my secret. I didn't want their skepticism or their hollow words of encouragement. When I called home for the obligatory weekly check-in, I'd listen to my mom gush about Ryan's latest fraternity fundraiser, or the job interview my dad had helped him line up through a friend. "And you, Liam?" she'd ask, an afterthought. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine, Mom," I'd say, staring at the application papers spread across my desk. "Just studying." Felt like I was forging a key in secret, a key that could unlock a future they never imagined for me. I sealed the thick envelope and sent it off, feeling a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. I had laid all my cards on the table. Now all I could do was wait. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning. I was in the library, grabbing a coffee before my shift. My phone buzzed, and I almost ignored it. I saw the subject line, Benjamin Ford Scholarship Committee. My heart stopped. My hands started to shake so badly I could barely unlock the screen. I opened the email, my eyes scanning the text, blurring the words together. Then I saw it. "Dear Mr. Moore, on behalf of the committee, it is our distinct pleasure to inform you that you have been selected as a 2024 Benjamin Ford National Scholar." I had to read it 3 times before it sank in. I sank into a chair, the coffee forgotten, a wave of dizziness washing over me. I had done it. Against all odds, I had actually done it. A laugh bubbled up out of me, a sound that was half sob, half shout of triumph. The librarian glared at me, and I just grinned back at her, unable to contain the sheer, explosive joy. The award was to be presented at my university's official graduation ceremony. The committee would be flying in a representative. It was a huge deal. That night, I called my parents. "Hey, great news!" my mom said as soon as she picked up. "Ryan got a job offer. An amazing one at a big firm downtown. Your father is so proud. We're taking him out to celebrate this weekend." Of course, the universe had to maintain its balance. "That's great for him," I said, my own news suddenly feeling small and insignificant in the shadow of their excitement for Ryan. "So, graduation is next month," I continued, pushing forward. "You're all still coming, right?" "Wouldn't miss it for the world," she chirped. "To see my boy walk across that stage. It will be one of the proudest days of my life." "My boy," singular. "You should get here a little early," I said, keeping my voice as casual as I could. "They're giving out a few student awards at the beginning of the ceremony. It might be nice." "Oh, awards," she said, a hint of disinterest in her voice. "That's nice, dear. Well, as long as we have a good seat to see Ryan, that's all that matters." "Right," I said. "See you then." I hung up, a cold smile touching my lips. It was perfect. They had no idea. They were walking into a play where they thought they knew the script, where they were the proud parents of the leading man. They had no idea I had rewritten the entire third act. And so we returned to that day, to the suffocating heat of the auditorium. Back to me in the front row, my heart hammering against my ribs. Back to my family, 3 rows back, beaming, waiting for the coronation of their golden boy. The dean was at the podium, his voice echoing through the hall. This award recognizes a level of perseverance and character that truly sets the recipient apart. I saw my mom pat Ryan's arm, a knowing, triumphant look on her face. She was so sure. She had spent a lifetime being sure. She had built her entire world around the certainty that Ryan was the special one, the one destined for accolades, while I was just Liam, dependable, quiet, and utterly unremarkable. I watched her, and I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt a strange, detached pity. She was living in a story she had written for herself, a story that was about to have its final chapter ripped out and replaced with one she could never have imagined. The dean looked out at the audience. The cameras were on my family, projecting their proud, expectant faces onto the massive screens. "This year's recipient," he boomed, "is a student who embodies the very spirit of this award. Please join me in congratulating Mr. Liam Moore." The moment my name was called, a profound and absolute silence fell over my corner of the universe. The thunderous applause of the crowd sounded distant, like listening to a storm from underwater. My entire focus narrowed to the 2 giant screens flanking the stage, where the camera lingered for a heartbeat too long on my family. It was like watching a film in slow motion. My mother's smile didn't just fade. It cracked and fell from her face, leaving behind a gaping hole of disbelief. Her hand, which had been proudly on my father's shoulder, dropped to her lap as if it had been burned. My father's puffed-up chest deflated. He blinked rapidly, his head tilting slightly as if he was trying to process a sound he couldn't understand. And Ryan just stared, his mouth slightly parted, his easygoing charm evaporating into thin air, replaced by a naked, stunning confusion. Then the camera found me. The spotlight hit, and I stood up, my legs feeling both shaky and incredibly strong. I smoothed the front of my gown and started the long walk to the stage. I didn't look at them, couldn't. Looking at them would have broken the spell. I kept my eyes fixed on Professor Albright, who was standing near the stage, a rare, genuine smile on his face. He gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was all the encouragement I needed. As I climbed the steps, the dean began to read from the official citation. His voice, amplified by the microphone, filled every corner of the auditorium. "Mr. Liam Moore," he began, "is a student of extraordinary intellect and even more extraordinary character. He has maintained a perfect 4.0 grade point average in one of our most rigorous programs. I saw my mother flinch. She had no idea. I had never told her. All while demonstrating a work ethic that can only be described as heroic. The dean paused, letting the words sink in. Without the benefit of any financial support from his family, Liam has worked 2 jobs, often totaling more than 40 hours a week, to fund his entire education himself. A low murmur rippled through the audience. People were turning their heads, looking at my family, who were now shrinking in their seats. The spotlight I was in felt like a heat lamp, but the glare being directed at them was one of public judgment. He has served our community as a librarian and as a cleaner, the dean continued, his voice ringing with admiration, sacrificing sleep and a social life to pursue his goal. He is a testament to the idea that success is not given, but earned through grit and determination. I reached the podium and shook the dean's hand, accepting the heavy, ornate plaque. He gestured for me to say a few words. I stepped up to the microphone, my hands steady. I looked out at the sea of faces, and for the first time, I felt no fear. I saw Chloe in the 3rd row, tears streaming down her face, a radiant smile breaking through. I saw Professor Albright, his arms crossed, looking on like a proud father. And then my eyes found them, my family. They looked small, exposed, stripped bare under the weight of 1,000 strangers' eyes. "Thank you," I said, my voice clear and strong. "Thank you to the Ford Committee for this incredible honor. I only have 2 people I need to thank for getting me here today." I saw a flicker of desperate hope in my mother's eyes, a last, pathetic wish that I would throw them a lifeline, that I would smooth this over and restore the family image she so carefully curated. I let the hope hang there for a second before I crushed it. "Professor Albright," I said, turning to him, "thank you for seeing something in me and for giving me a chance when I needed it most. You changed my life." Then I looked towards Chloe. "And to my friend, Chloe, thank you for the coffee, for the late-night study sessions, and for being my family when I didn't have one." And that was it. I said nothing more. I didn't need to. My silence, my omission, was the loudest statement I could possibly make. I looked directly at my mother one last time, my face a blank canvas. I gave her nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just nothing. I walked off the stage to a standing ovation. The sound was deafening. It was the sound of my new life beginning. This was the moment that changed everything, the moment I finally took back control of my own story. Thank you for sticking with me this far. You're amazing. If you're still here, please do me a favor and like this video and comment with the number 1 down below, just so I know you've been on this journey with me. It doesn't just help more people find this story. It lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest reason I have the courage to share the rest of what happened. The rest of the ceremony was a blur. I don't remember the other names being called or the turning of the tassels. I just sat there, holding the heavy plaque in my lap, feeling the weight of it, the solid, tangible proof of my victory. As soon as it was over, a chaotic flood of people poured into the aisles. I was immediately surrounded by well-wishers, classmates, professors. Even the university president came over to shake my hand. I was swept up in a current of congratulations, and for a few minutes, I allowed myself to be carried by it. But I knew it was coming. The confrontation. I managed to excuse myself and headed for a quieter side exit, hoping to find Chloe. But they were waiting for me in the hallway, a tense, awkward triangle blocking my path. My father, my mother, and Ryan. My mother rushed forward, her face a mess of forced smiles and panicked eyes. "Liam, honey, congratulations. We are so proud of you." Her voice was an octave too high. Proud was not the word for the expression I had seen on her face on the big screen. Shocked was more accurate. Horrified, perhaps. "We had no idea it was such a big deal," she continued, her hands fluttering nervously. "You should have told us." "Told you what?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "Told you that I was applying for a scholarship based on financial hardship? Why would I do that? According to you, I didn't have any." Her face paled. Now, Liam, that's not fair. We always knew you were working. You knew I was working. I cut her off. You didn't know I was scrubbing toilets at 3 in the morning to keep from dropping out. You didn't know because you never asked. You never once, in 4 years, asked me how I was paying for this. My father finally spoke, his voice gruff. There's no need for this tone, son. We're your family. We love you. Love. The word felt foreign in my mouth. Love wouldn't have left me to sink or swim alone. I turned my gaze to my mother, the architect of it all. I looked directly into her eyes. You told me Ryan deserved your help, and I didn't, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. But it cut through the hallway noise like a knife. I guess that was the best thing you ever did for me. You taught me I couldn't rely on anyone but myself. So thank you. For nothing. I saw the tears welling up in her eyes, but for the first time in my life, they had no effect on me. They were tears of humiliation, not remorse. I made to move past them, but Ryan stepped in my way. He looked lost, his usual confidence completely gone. Liam, wait. Get out of my way, Ryan, I said, my voice hard as stone. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. I pushed past them and walked out the door into the bright afternoon sun, not looking back. I left them standing there in the dim hallway, the perfect family portrait shattered into a million pieces. The air outside felt clean. It was the first breath of my new, free life. I had made it halfway across the lawn, heading towards the parking lot where Chloe was waiting, when I heard footsteps hurrying behind me. Liam, please wait. It was Ryan. I stopped but didn't turn around. I heard him come to a halt a few feet behind me, breathing heavily. What do you want, Ryan? I said, my voice tired. Come to tell me I should manage my time better. No, he said, his voice quiet, strained. I came to say I'm sorry. I finally turned to face him. He looked younger than I'd ever seen him, stripped of his usual charm and bravado. He couldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at the grass. I knew, he mumbled, so low I could barely hear him. You knew what? I asked, though I already knew the answer. He finally looked up, and his eyes were filled with a shame so profound it startled me. I knew they weren't paying for you. I knew you were working all the time. I knew it wasn't fair. The confession hung in the air between us. It was one thing to suspect it, another to hear it said aloud. Then why? I asked, my voice raw. Why didn't you ever say anything? Why did you let them do it? He shook his head, a bitter, self-deprecating smile twisting his lips. Because I'm a coward, he said, the words clear and sharp. Because I liked being the favorite. I liked being the one they worried about, the one they invested in. He took a shaky breath. And I was jealous, Liam. You were always smarter. Things always came easy to you in school. I had to work twice as hard just to keep up. And I was afraid. I was afraid that if they ever really looked at you, if they ever saw how bright you were shining on your own, they'd stop looking at me altogether. It was the most honest thing he had ever said to me. The confession didn't erase the years of neglect, but it reframed them. He wasn't just my oblivious, privileged brother. He was insecure and afraid, a willing participant in the family drama because he was terrified of losing his starring role. He was another victim of their warped system, albeit one with far more benefits. I didn't have forgiveness in me. Not then. The wounds were too fresh, too deep. So you just watched, I said, the statement flat, without accusation. It was just a fact. Yeah, he whispered, his gaze dropping back to the ground. I just watched. And I'm sorry. I looked at my twin brother, the boy who shared my face but had lived a completely different life. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger towards him. I just felt a deep, profound sadness for what we could have been, and what we never would be. Goodbye, Ryan, I said, and turned and walked away, leaving him alone on the perfectly manicured lawn. There was nothing more to say. 6 months later, I was a different person living in a different universe. My universe was a small but bright apartment on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. From my window, I could see the endless, pulsating energy of the city, A place that didn't care where you came from, only what you could do. After the suffocating smallness of my family life, the anonymity of New York was a blessed relief. The Benjamin Ford Scholarship had been my launchpad. The job at Ford and Levine was everything I had hoped for and more. It was demanding, challenging, and utterly meritocratic. No one cared who my parents were or what fraternity I was in. They cared if my numbers were accurate, if my analysis was sharp, if I could handle the pressure. And I thrived on it. I was finally earning a real salary, enough to afford my rent, pay for my own groceries, and even start building a savings account. The first time I bought a brand new winter coat without checking my bank balance first, I almost cried in the middle of the store. It wasn't about the coat. It was about the freedom from the constant, gnawing anxiety about money that had been my shadow for 4 years. I made new friends, people from all over the country, drawn to the city by their own ambitions. They were bright, funny, and interesting. When they asked about my family, I kept it simple. It's complicated, I'd say, and they were worldly enough to leave it at that. My past was my own. It no longer defined my present. My only real link to that past was Chloe. We talked on the phone every Sunday. She had taken a job in Chicago and was loving it. She was my touchstone, the one person who knew the whole story and had been in my corner from the beginning. "How are you, really?" she asked one afternoon. "I'm good," I said, looking out my window at the city lights just starting to twinkle. "I'm really good. I feel light." And it was true. The chip on my shoulder, the one Sarah had accused me of carrying, was gone. It had been replaced by a quiet confidence. I had faced the worst, and I had not only survived, but I had triumphed. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore, least of all to my family. My mother called sometimes. The first few calls were awful. She would cry, then get angry, then try to bargain, rewriting history in real time. "I don't know why you're being so dramatic," she'd say. "We always supported you." I learned to be polite but distant. I kept the calls short. I didn't argue. I just created a boundary of cool, impenetrable calm. I was no longer the angry, hurt boy. I was a man they didn't know, and they had lost the privilege of getting to know him. I was building a life from scratch, a life that was entirely my own creation. It was built not on inheritance or entitlement, but on sleepless nights, on mopped floors, on the relentless pursuit of a future they told me I didn't deserve. And every day, in the bustling, indifferent, magnificent city of New York, I was proving them wrong. I was happy, and I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that was the one thing they could never forgive me for. Life settled into a new, comfortable rhythm. I was excelling at work and was even given an early promotion, moving from junior analyst to a full associate position. The increase in my salary was significant, and it gave me a sense of security I had only ever dreamed of. One day, a thick envelope arrived at my office. It had no return address, but I recognized the spiky, uncertain handwriting. It was from Ryan. I almost threw it away, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it that night in my apartment. It wasn't a long letter. He wrote that he was still working at the firm downtown, but he had moved out of his fancy apartment and into a smaller place. He was paying his own rent now, cooking his own meals. He said it was harder than he thought it would be. He wrote that he and our parents weren't getting along very well. They couldn't understand why he wasn't more grateful for the life they had given him. The last paragraph was what struck me. "I think about what you did all the time," he wrote. "How you did it all on your own. I used to think you were angry and bitter, but now I think you were just strong. I hope one day I can be half as strong as you are. I know I don't deserve it, but I hope that someday you might be able to see me as a brother again." I folded the letter and put it away. It didn't magically heal the years of hurt, but it was something. It was a crack in the wall he had helped build between us. A sign that maybe, just maybe, the man he was becoming was different from the boy he had been. A few weeks later, during my Sunday call with Chloe, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. "You are not going to believe what my mom told me," she said, her voice a mixture of gossip and outrage. "You know your Aunt Carol? My mother's younger sister. A woman who was always cloyingly sweet to my face, always pinching my cheek and telling me what a handsome young man I was. Yeah, what about her? I asked. Well, Chloe continued, my mom was talking to her at the grocery store, and apparently, Aunt Carol has been telling everyone what a tragedy it is that you've abandoned your family after all they did for you. I rolled my eyes. Sounds about right. No, wait, it gets worse, Chloe said. My mom said Carol was bragging. She said she was the one who advised your mom to invest everything in Ryan. She told her, and I quote, you have to put your resources into the horse that's most likely to win the race. Ryan is the social one, the one who will make the connections. Liam is just a bookworm. She was the one constantly in your mom's ear, reinforcing all her biases. It was a stunning revelation. Aunt Carol, the smiling, two-faced manipulator. She hadn't just been a passive observer. She had been an active agent in my emotional and financial abandonment. It was like finding out the person who was supposed to be the referee was secretly betting on the other team. It cast my mother's actions in a new, slightly more pathetic light. She wasn't just biased. She had been easily led, her own worst instincts validated by her sister's poisonous advice. It was a detail that explained so much, a final, ugly twist in the story. It didn't change what had happened. My mother was still responsible for her own choices, but it made the whole sad affair feel less like a targeted act of malice and more like a pathetic conspiracy of weakness and bad judgment. It helped me detach even further. This wasn't a reflection of my worth. It was a reflection of their profound and deeply rooted flaws. They weren't powerful figures who had judged me unworthy. They were just small, insecure people, and I was finally, truly free of them. It's been a few years now. I'm still in New York. I'm a senior associate at my firm now, managing my own team. My apartment is bigger, the view is better, but that feeling of peace I found here has remained constant. I stand by my window sometimes, looking out at the endless river of headlights on the street below, each one a person with their own story, their own struggles, their own quiet victories. And I think about my own journey. My mother still calls, less frequently now. Her voice is quieter, laced with a permanent note of regret. The calls are brief, superficial. We talk about the weather, about my work. We never talk about the past. It's a locked room between us, and we have both accepted that the key was thrown away long ago. I saw Ryan last Christmas. He flew to New York on his own dime. It was awkward at first, but we found a fragile, tentative new ground. We talked for hours, not as the golden boy and the ghost, but as two men who shared a childhood, however fractured. He is changing slowly but surely. Maybe one day we'll be brothers again. I'm not sure, but for the first time I'm open to the possibility. I never did it for revenge. Not really. Revenge is a hot, burning emotion, and what I felt for most of those years was a cold, hard resolve. I did it for survival. I did it to prove to myself that my worth was not determined by their valuation of me. My mother was right, in a way. The most painful, ironic truth of it all is that she was right. I didn't deserve their help. I didn't deserve a handout that came with the invisible strings of their approval and the heavy weight of their expectations. I earned what I have. I earned it in the silent stacks of the library. I earned it in the greasy kitchens of late-night diners. I earned it through lonely nights and exhausted mornings. I earned it by refusing to be the person they decided I was. Sometimes, the greatest act of defiance isn't a loud confrontation, but the quiet, relentless, and unwavering pursuit of your own life. The best revenge isn't loud. It's walking away from the people who tried to dim your light and building your own damn sun. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to prove everyone wrong, just to prove something to yourself? Share your story in the comments below. And please don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what I share next. It means the world to me.